Hello there, this is Agri Talk right here on KTN Farmers TV. Another day to discuss about matters farming. And with me today is a very interesting story. And have you ever just imagined yourself cycling to go to a farm to learn about farming? And the people who are here today with me cycled all the way from Netherlands. They've been just going through countries, you can imagine, count from Netherlands to Nairobi to just get to learn about different kinds of farming. And with me is Lucas and Aisha. They're going to be joining us today just to discuss about this. Just stay there. Remember, we are going to stick with them the whole time. And let's get into the conversation. Are we ready?
Yes.
Yeah,
sure.
okay. So Aisha, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I'm Aisha Hassan. I grew up in the Netherlands, a country that is known for cycling. I did my studies there. I graduated last year from my studies, International Development Studies at Wageningen University. Wageningen University is known for agricultural studies. And yeah, my focus is on food governance, food sovereignty, and food security, and I wanted to explore that. So yeah, that's
okay.
In short.
Thank you so much.
Sure
Thank you so much. Lucas, also introduce yourself and maybe tell us how this idea came about.
Sure. So my name is Lucas Paltanavičius. I come from Lithuania. It's a tiny country in the Baltic states. Not many people know where that country is. But all my life, all my family is kind of working in this agricultural field, and yeah, and I also did my education in agriculture. Then I followed the path, and I studied also in Wageningen, also in the Netherlands. So this is where actually our kind of love for cycling started. I would say during the pandemic we started cycling long distance. We cycled to Luxembourg, to Switzerland, and you know, during the studies we learned a lot about the farming in the textbooks, but we wanted kind of to dig deeper and to understand how is it in practice. You know, we talk so much about what the farmers should do, what kind of sustainable practices they should implement, but what does it actually really take to put those practices in place? And you know, we wanted always to cycle from Cairo to Cape Town, but we were not very confident if we can do it. So we decided to start from the university where the idea came from. And bit by bit, we started moving with the bicycles that we already had. And we went, you know, to the farmers to ask them, what does regenerative agriculture mean to them? You know, to learn, to do the work, to get our hands dirty and to experience the hard work that happens in the farms. So I think that's the long story short.
Aisha, anything to add on that?
No, I completely agree with Lucas. You know, studying in Wageningen has brought us a lot. We learned a lot about, you know, theoretically about agriculture, but we felt indeed a bit lost. When we finalized our studies, we were thinking of what is next, what kind of solutions are out there when it comes to climate change and the effects of climate change. We always hear about the struggles and the challenges, but there are tons of solutions out there. So we really wanted to learn from farmers what kind of practices are they using to combat climate change, for example. So, yeah.
All right, and now let's move on and also as you sit down and say, okay, we are coming up with this idea, we want to cycle, why did it start? Where did it really start? Did it start from Netherlands or like the learning about agriculture now and farming systems? Yeah. Where did it start? Did you say, okay, let us now move to the next town or let us move to the next country? How did it start and what did you learn from this?
You mean studying agriculture in general?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think for me it really started with my university degree. When I was studying at Wageningen University, I was surrounded by other peers who were really focused on agriculture, on food technology, and I was doing political science at that time, but with an interest in food governance. So I was really interested in, okay, how does it look like in practice? But during my studies, I didn't really have the time to really explore this. So when I graduated, we set up Cycle to Farms project in order to let us learn during a long experience. So starting from the Netherlands, we visited 2 farms, then we went to Germany. From Germany, we went to Austria, visiting several farms, and then all the way up to Kenya. So we have visited quite some countries so far, and we have seen a lot of course, diversity, but most of all, a lot of similarities. So yeah, and it's really exciting to learn as you go, and we also practice. We help the farmers. We stay at least a week usually at the farms, so we can, get our hands dirty and, help out. I think that's the best way to learn.
And now, to you, Lucas, she's spoken about getting your hands dirty, and earlier on, as we were speaking, you were telling me when you get your hands dirty is when you get to learn really about what is going on in different areas and the different cultures that you've been able to see up to now. First of all, how long has it been since you started from Netherlands to this place?
Well, that's a very good question. So I think we started planning once we finished our studies. So that was already in February last year. Then it took us around 3 months to prepare. So we've been on the road for the past 8 months. Yeah, so we crossed almost, we lost the count, probably around 12 or more countries, and we visited quite a few farms.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested. 8 months on the road, cycling, and learning about agriculture. So first of all, when you just tell someone about such an idea, we are going to be cycling throughout the globe to try and learn about agriculture. First of all, I believe agriculture systems in the Netherlands and through the countries that you've come, you've just gone through are very different. So what is that one thing that you've been able to learn when you just pass through all these countries? What is that one thing in agriculture that still sticks out?
Of course, it's very hard to compress 8 months into one learning, but I think one of the learnings could be that, the first farm that we visited in the Netherlands, he had the food forest, and he was a pioneer of food forest in the Netherlands, right? And where he got this idea? He got this idea from Kenya, from while visiting farms in Kenya, and I think this is the main learning that, the traditional farming, the traditional knowledge that happens across the globe, we should preserve it, and we should keep on doing those practices. And when it comes to sustainability, when it comes to regenerative practices, we talk about not to use external inputs, not to use tillage, to use the indigenous crops and plants, and so when you look back at the kind of native farming methods, in the end, it all makes sense. So this is, in some senses, regenerative farming. So I think what we are trying to figure out is what are those practices, how to preserve them, and how to help farmers to keep on doing what they're doing, and what their ancestors were doing. Yeah.
All right, and Aisha, now, he's spoken about regenerative farming. When you look at it, regenerative farming, what does it mean to you?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So that's actually why we started this project. We were not so sure what it actually meant. We saw it everywhere. Every newspaper article was talking about it. Different companies are talking about it. But we were trying to understand what does this concept mean in the eyes of the farmers that we visit, because they are the ones who are practicing it. So it's important to have an understanding, visit all these farms, and actually we always ask this question, what does regenerative agriculture mean to you? We always start with this question, and it's very diverse, but at the same time it's very similar, because they all practice the same, they have all the same understandings of regenerative agriculture. So focusing on creating an ecosystem that functions by itself, right? That you restore, but eventually it functions and it's efficient. So, and that all starts with the soil. So if your soil is healthy, then everything that grows above it is also healthy. and you're creating nutritious food. You're creating an ecosystem where people, earth, and everything is in balance. So it's all about, I think, if I would have to say it in my own words, it's about balancing humans and us living on the earth, the present, but also the past, right? So thinking of the future generations and making sure that the soil is still healthy enough for them to have nutritious food. So
Yeah, and I think ultimate goal is, in the past you could even drink water from the river. It's impossible right now, right? We were crossing one river in Jordan, and the Bedouins, local guys, they were saying, you are not allowed to swim. It's kind of, you might get, in
it's
sick or
polluted.
yeah, so I think the very ultimate goal is that the nature, the ecosystem is kind of in balance. It's a place where it's nice to be. You have a nutritious and healthy food, a healthy society, diverse food. So that's maybe sounds very idealistic, but it's not so far ago that the life used to look like that, right?
Yeah.
So that's
All right, and also still on this matter of regenerative farming, you are at COP27, right? You attended the event. What was it that really stood out for you in that conference when they were talking about now the area of agriculture, because it was one of the main topics of discussion, and where we are going when it comes to trying to just embrace the environment and trying to save the environment? What really stood out in agriculture that is going to help it grow?
Yeah, to me it was really interesting because this was the first COP I ever attended. It was also the first COP where they were talking about agriculture. So can you imagine? It's such an important sector in our society, in our human society, but this is the first time that we are discussing about it. So I think that's already a step forward. And then obviously all different stakeholders coming together. That was really interesting, and seeing so many different solutions to sustainable agriculture. But I think most importantly, it's already a step forward that we talk about it, that we invite farmers to these events. But I hope in the future that the farmers also get on the stage, right? That they are the ones talking to us and that they are telling about their experiences and how we have to support them in their transition, right? So that's something I learned, and I hope that with Cycle to Farms we can provide that platform.
Yeah, I think we've seen so many posters of African smallholder farms, in the COP.
Yes.
Almost every pavilion had it. I haven't seen many farmers there, So maybe that's the kind of the downside part. And I think what we're trying to address and trying to do our best is, to document the stories and to share the voice of the farmers as much as we can, right? Through the articles, through the videos that we make, or talking with the policymakers, sharing the stories of regenerative farmers, because in most of the ways they are not kind of supported for the hard work that they are doing, and I think that's something that needs a little bit of extra work to happen.
Okay. Yeah. And now also you've spoken about farmers. As you make your journeys to farms and you stick around a farm or with a farmer, what are some of the ways you help them to just in this regenerative type of agriculture?
Yeah. Well, I think, we come there for 1 week. I think the most what we can help is, we take, we learn from them, of course. We help out to do with the daily task, so that we are not just a burden on their shoulders, right? But we really try to engage, to build a connection, to learn from each other. And I think the most what we can do with this project at this phase is, to share their stories as wide as we can. So, for example, we write stories in one of the biggest farmers magazine, right? We are aiming to create a documentary. It's not an easy task.
Yeah. And they're usually happy that we are there, you know, like their way of farming is extremely labor intensive, right? So it's not easy way, especially if you're in the beginning phase of restoring land. It requires a lot of effort, it requires a lot of observation. So what we do is we just ask, how can we help you the best? And then usually they give us tasks, like whether it's mulching, you know, chopping grass and then putting it on the soil, wetting it, you know, keeping an eye on things. Like it's small things and it seems very boring, but actually that way you really see what is happening. Like you see one plant is not doing well, for example, and then you try to observe what is happening around it, right? Instead of just doing it because you have to do it, you really think of why you're doing certain things. So I think that's something we really learned when we visited these farms. Yeah.
All right. And now also still with visiting farms, what are some of the challenges that farmers have usually face, especially within our region in Africa, the countries that you've gotten to visit and the farmers that you've gotten to visit there? What are some of the challenges that are always there when you visit?
Well, one of the biggest challenges, and it's not only in Africa, it's everywhere that we have seen, is that the farmers, they struggle in their transition from conventional to regenerative or from organic to regenerative. It's always a struggle for them because financially it costs a lot to make that transition, right?
Yes.
It's labor intensive, so you need a lot of support. You need quite a lot of knowledge. You need to be some sort of, you have to kind of educate yourself about what it takes to regenerate land, right? If you're not from a farmer's background, for example. Some farmers, they are the first ones farming in their family. Others come from a background where their parents were conventional farmers. Then you have to prove to your family, you know, I'm gonna do it completely different, you know, so there's a lot of tension for them. So having a support system is important, whether it's knowledge based, but also financially, I think, because the first 5 years are extremely costly, and the first 5 years is also where they still need to break even, right? So having the support from financial investors or, you know, governments, that's very important, and that's something that the farmers always tell us as well. Yeah.
Lucas, any challenge that maybe she has not touched on that you'd want to really state?
I think another challenge that all the farmers are facing globally, not only regenerative, but also the conventional farmers, is, you know, the drought. So we've seen, because when we left in Europe, it was already summer, so it was kind of, we saw, you know, dried out rivers and wildfires. In Jordan and Egypt, it was particularly dry. Here in Kenya, we see all sorts of environments, you know, from lush green, and 100 kilometers after cycling there, suddenly it's very dry. So we get to see a bit of everything. And, you know, in Jordan and in Egypt or in Lake Ipia, we've seen how farming can happen also in these semi-arid or very arid areas, right? And how regenerative practices are kind of tackling all these water retention and how to water management issues, you know, how to maintain that water in your field, how to be more efficient. And Kenya, I think it's, you know, you have plenty of creative ideas, and I think there's a lot to learn from the Kenyan farmers. Like the first farmer, you know, we visited, we learned a lot from Kenya, then he's trying to implement elsewhere. So I think, you know, yeah, you're doing great here. Yeah.
And while you're still in Kenya, are there other farms that you'd want to visit? And do you usually visit like a specific farm? Okay, if this is a farmer who deals with crops, this is a farmer who deals with livestock, how is it? How is it usually?
So the beauty about regenerative agriculture is that you focus on farming practices that are holistic. So livestock has a place in farming. Crops have a place. Agroforestry has a place. So you think of all these different elements and you place them in order so that the farm functions well, right? So they focus on their design and all these things. And actually we are very lucky because in that way we learn a lot about different things, right? But each farmer does it differently. Each farmer has their own business model, right? One is more focused on tea, other one is a bit more focused on coffee. So you learn that way, and it's also, yeah, it just shows that it can be done in different scales as well, right? Not only small scale, but also bigger, larger scale farming. Yeah.
All right. And also, now let's move to another issue. You go and tell someone, okay, I travel to just go and look at farms. I go and visit farms and help the farmers over there. First of all, financially, do you have a system where maybe you say you have a sponsor who gives you this finances to move? Because traveling from one region to another, even within Kenya alone, requires a lot of money.
Yeah.
So tell me about it, and also you can add on what
Yeah.
he'll say.
Yeah, of course. When we kind of came up with this idea, it was one of the challenges. Can we actually afford to do it? Can we actually, maybe we should spend a few more years working and saving money for it, and maybe then we can go, right? You have all these kind of ideas, and I think the main idea is it's not true. You can always achieve what you want just by doing it, right? So what we did, we decided to write down our thoughts. What's our mission? What do we want to do? How long are we gonna do it? Just we just decided, okay, let's just make this decision, right? Then we decided to create a website, cycletofarms.com, right? Then we started sharing what we want to do, what we are trying to achieve, what we are gonna do, and we have a donations button. So family and friends, and after that, more people started donating and supporting. So that was a helpful start. But then we started searching for partners who are also involved in the regenerative agriculture field, right? So we worked with some organizations like a translation agency from Germany. They decided to support us. It was a crucial and a very great support.
Helpful.
Yeah, we worked also with the Rainforest Alliance. They believed in our mission, so they just supported. And and now by writing articles and creating videos, it brings us to different places. And so I think the main learning is the finances should not stop you somehow. It's challenging, but you can sort it out, right? It's possible.
All right, so at least now we understand how you move and what usually happens. And Aisha, now let us come to you and look at after you've visited. First of all, how many kilometers have you covered so far?
We have covered around 6,000 almost, I think, kilometers. I have to check. Lucas is usually the one tracking it, right? Am I right?
6,000.
6,000 kilometers, yeah.
Kilometers?
Right?
I would say 5,000.
Okay, sorry.
Okay.
Not yet.
Can we do that again? Okay. Yeah, so approximately 5,000 kilometers
5,000
so
kilometers.
far. But if you go on our website, we have a little a map where we show which farms we have been to and how much kilometers we did so far. So it's connected with the watch, and then just...
in total, we are planning to do 7,000 kilometers. So after Kenya, we go to Uganda, Rwanda, Tanzania. Then we'll take a break. Then we will rethink: can we fund ourselves to go further? How can we proceed? But I think we have this kind of dream and belief to go further. And I think we learned a lot more. And I think now we are in a place where we can help farmers even more. So I think clearly we'll keep on going.
And on that point, where you've said you want now to help farmers, what you've learned, speaking about the international policy reforms in support of regenerative agriculture, what are your thoughts on this, first of all?
Yeah, no, it's very important. That's why we also always try to be in conversation with different policymakers. So a few weeks ago, we talked with the European Commissioner on the European Green Deal, sorry. So it was really interesting to talk with him, to share some messages of the farmers that we have visited in Europe with him, and to explain that, you know, it's very important that they come up with a policy and support, and that makes regenerative agriculture more attractive for farmers to transition, right? Because at this moment there is no support. They just have to do it themselves. They have to find crowdfunding initiatives in order to sustain themselves, to plant more trees. All of that costs a lot of money. So I think on that side there is a lot to do, but it's for us interesting to keep up the conversation, and hopefully also in Africa to reach out to some policymakers here. So that's what we are now busy with, trying to reach out to those. Yeah.
And Lucas, your addition, maybe your reaction to this?
Of course, Aisha, she's more in the political sciences, so I would leave it to her. But of course, you know, soil is just never kind of mentioned in any policies, right? It's like a natural resource that we just use, consume, and we leave it behind, right? So I think it should start from, you know, from fundamentals. I think, you know, somehow to kind of maintain the natural resource that you have. That's, you know, my take would be. I don't know how that works in the policy, but hopefully later on.
We are going to take a short break, but we'll be back with more. Don't go too far.